مرحبا وأهلا بكم في برنامج داخل واشنطن. معكم مضيفكم روبرت ساتلوف. في عالم السياسة العام الجديد 2018 بدأ بداية نارية. شاهدنا بالفعل إغلاق الحكومة الفيدرالية بسبب معركة حزبية حول الهجرة وفضيحة تخص العلاقة الجنسية المزعومة للرئيس مع النجمة للأفلام الإباحية، وتقارير عن المحقق الخاص الذي يبحث في أمر روسيا وانتخابات 2016 مستعد الآن لاستجواب الرئيس ترامب. وما هذا إلا الشهر الأول من العام، ولكن ربما تكون هناك طريقة أكثر تفاؤلا للنظر إلى الأحداث التي وقعت مؤخرا. الاقتصاد الأمريكي أقوى من أي وقت منذ ركود 2008، وعدد العاملين أكبر من أي وقت سابق، وسوق الأسهم أكثر ارتفاعا من أي وقت سابق، والخفض الضريبي الكبير الذي أكير الشهر الماضي يدفع الشركات الآن تكون أكثر ثقة من أي وقت سابق، بل والتلوخ في الأفق فرصة أن يؤدي إغلاق الحكومة إلى اتفاق تشريعي الشهر القادم يحل مشكلة الميزانية والهجرة ورغبة الرئيس في بناء جدار حدودي. ما القصة الحقيقية؟ هل كوب السياسة الأمريكية نصف ممتلئ أم نصف فارغ؟ لنميز الحقيقة من خلال حول وضع السياسة الأمريكية وكفاءة الكونغرس وقيادة إدارة ترامب، يسرني أن أرحب باللجنة تضم خبيرين سياسيين متميزين هما ديفيد هوكينز وبرادلي بليكمان. Welcome back to Dakhel, Washington. Well, it's only the end of the first month of the year, but a lot of politics has already happened. And to help decipher this, I'm delighted to welcome Bradley Blakeman and David Hawkins. So, gentlemen, thank you very much. Let's begin with something that occurred in the month of January that our viewers abroad are probably wondering what is going on in America. And that is the federal government shutting down. So tell me, what did it mean? How did it happen? David, why don't you start?
I think the bottom line is it didn't mean very much at all in the grand scheme of things, except that it inconvenienced some federal bureaucrats and some people who wanted to use federal services over a weekend and one weekday. But it's symbolically important for all the players in Washington, for the Republicans in Congress and for President Trump, who's also a Republican, who are running the first Republican government, all Republican government in Washington in 12 years. There was the sense that they, couldn't run the show unilaterally by themselves. For the Democrats, there was the sense that they forced to shut down unnecessarily on an unrelated issue, which was the whole issue of how to treat people who came into the country illegally as children at the behest of their parents, but really had no choice about their illegal immigration status. And for Trump himself, it was a bad sign that he chose this one time in his whole presidency to stay totally quiet. The great deal maker decided to stay quiet. So short-term sort of black marks for each of the players in D.C., but if they don't shut it down again, the year in Washington is such that this will be long forgotten by the time the election rolls around.
And Bradley, how do you interpret this? Is this responsibility of the Republicans because they run government, or is this responsibility for the Democrats because they threw a monkey wrench into the system, or is there blame to go around?
I think there's blame to go around, but at the end of the day, I think Democrats realized they made a terrible mistake. They played a game of chicken that they knew in the end could really do damage to them. And when they saw that the government shutdown by the public was causing damage to them, they caved. There was nothing different to what they agreed with during the shutdown that could have been offered to them before the shutdown. So I think Trump wins. the shutdown game. But I agree, this will be shortly remembered in all the other things that are coming before our country. But I think Trump drove home the point that Republicans do not run everything. Democrats in the Senate, because of the rules of the Senate, can stop the president's agenda if they so choose, but they do it at a price.
And will there be a deal in several weeks? Will we have another government shutdown? What do you gentlemen think?
I don't think there's going to be the technical deadline is February 8th. I doubt that there will be another shutdown on February 8th. It doesn't seem like there's going to be an immigration deal. It seems like instead, remember that this immigration deal doesn't really have a formal place in these budget negotiations. It's sort of a side deal that the Democrats want to get attached to the budget. There are other big issues. For example, the U.S. government's budget year started in October, and the U.S. government still doesn't know how much money it's supposed to be spending during a budget year that's now almost half over, because Congress and the president have never settled on the big spending numbers. So my guess is that they're going to concentrate on that between now and February 8th, keep the government open, and then an immigration deal, if it happens, will have to happen after that.
Just more broadly for a moment, just to explain to our viewers, it is a pretty crazy way to run one of the largest businesses in the world, the federal government. What does it mean when the government shuts down? I have this image from the old movie, The Mouse That Roared, that if a little country wanted to come and invade, that's the day to do it.
Yeah. Well, you can't spend money you don't have, right? We can't do it in our households. The government can't do it either. But the government still functions. It's really a fiction. The necessary components of the government will always appear for work, whether it's the military, the judiciary. So the government shutdown is more ominous in the way it sounds than actually in its application. But the truth is, the American system of continuing resolutions and not dealing with a budget, any corporation has a 5-year plan, right? Now, we have a $4 trillion economy. How is it that the United States government doesn't operate that way and have some foresight? Certainly, we have to maintain the military 10 years from now, 20 years from now. Why don't we have the kind of budgeting that is necessary to give not only the government some peace of mind, but also the private sector? It's a symbiotic relationship between what our government does and what our private sector does.
And having watched this for so many years, do you think there's any chance that cooler heads will prevail, not just to have a deal on the budget, but to correct the system?
Not in the short term, no. I think there doesn't. It seems like perversely the brokenness of the system. All the players seem to think it works to their advantage somehow. So no, I mean, I think what the experts, what people who think about this from a nonpartisan level say is the U.S. government is big enough that probably we should be having a 2-year budget where we spend the money 2 years at a time and then spend that intervening year, the Congress and the government sort of figuring out if the money's being spent properly and our programs working and do improvements need to be made. That's been sort of the consensus view of the experts for many, many years. It's never come close to happening.
All right. Well, let's move on to the next issue, which has occupied so much political time and space in the last few weeks, and that is the Russia investigation. Lots of developments, including the idea that the president himself may soon be talking with the special investigator, unless, of course, he's firing him. So, Bradley, bring us up to date on this.
Well, basically, in my opinion, as a lawyer who's been through investigations before, for clients, not for myself, you don't tend to interview the big fish without going through the school of little fish. So I think if the president is deposed in the next few weeks, I think that signals the end of the official investigation. What comes next is the evaluation of the investigation and what happens. The question is, how much time will that take? But certainly the president is a person of interest, if anything else, rather than a target. But I don't think he avoids being interviewed by Mueller and his team. The question is, how will he be interviewed? Is it going to be done under oath? It doesn't have to be done under oath, because the fact that you're questioned by a federal agent, you cannot lie as a matter of law. But the president may want to do it just to check that box, because Hillary didn't do it when she was
Hillary
investigated.
Clinton.
Right. So he may want to do it just to show that he's being truthful and candid with the investigators. Having said that, I think it's a good sign that we're coming to an end to this. The question is, we don't know what the ultimate end is going to be. But after being in this town for so many years, I have to believe that if there was anything there with collusion with the Russians, as far as Trump is concerned, it would have leaked by now. And I don't see any crime that was committed. Mistakes made, absolutely. Meetings that shouldn't have happened, I can guarantee it. But that doesn't rise to criminal behavior.
David, you're looking at the investigation, moving toward the president. How do you see it?
I'm agreeing with Bradley up to that point, which is that what seems to be oddly the case, as it has been in so many cases of American political problems for presidents in the past, is it's not the crime itself, it's the efforts to cover it up. This was sort of at the core of Watergate that forced Richard Nixon to resign. In the end, what got Bill Clinton impeached and actually tried in the Senate when he was acquitted was not that he'd actually slept with or had sexual intimacy with a former White House intern, but that he'd lied about it. In this case, it seems as though everything we see from the outside, not being inside the special prosecutor's office, is that what they're focusing on is obstruction of justice, not the collusion stuff that Bradley was talking about.
Explain what this means.
What is obstruction of justice? It means that the president is being suspected for, or is being looked at for whether he tried to block federal prosecutors and federal investigators from investigating him, even though he says he's innocent and there's no there. And that may, in the end, be more or less true, but you still can't prevent the federal prosecutors and the Justice Department from looking at whether you did anything wrong.
So in theory, even if there's no underlying crime, there are potentially criminal behavior in stopping the investigators from doing their job in some fashion.
Absolutely true. Whether it's, and that could have been the most obvious one that I think your viewers may be remembering, is that the president fired the FBI director, who at the time was leading the investigation. The president also, there's widespread reports that the president had conversations with other people about trying to, make sure that the Attorney General, who is his buddy, continued to supervise all this, rather than recuse himself, rather than step aside and say, no, I'm too close to the president to do this. So yes, lots of things.
When we look at this, what's the politics of this so far? Has the investigation so far been working to the president's advantage? I'm the victim, I'm being targeted by these great forces, or is this eroding some support for the president?
I think this investigation has become so muddled that it's hard to know who the actual targets are. You have the FBI, who's had to fire people or replace them because of their bias in their personal communications. You have leaks by the FBI. You have different targets that are unrelated to the original charge of the investigation, with Papadopoulos and others who have pled guilty to perjury, but unrelated to the underlying investigation. These were personal to them. So this has become so muddled. I talk to people all the time. They don't even know what it means anymore. They don't know who the targets are. They think it's become politicized because of what we've seen happening within the FBI. So I think the sooner this concludes for everyone, the better. But I don't see the president taking the kinds of hits that ordinarily would happen, but for the fact that this has become so muddled and so confusing to the American people.
I think that's a great point, which is that the American people, very few percentage are lawyers. The American people,
thank God.
If the American people are going to buy this politically, it's going to have to be very simple. It's going to have to be a very simple charge that you and I could explain to our children or our aging parents or people that we deal with who don't think about politics ever. And at the moment, it doesn't seem that way. And at the moment, it seems like the president is doing a good job, and his allies, of spinning up lots of mud, as he said, to muddying it up. They are now doing a heck of a job of trying to portray the entire Justice Department, and especially the FBI, as out to get him, as on a personal vendetta. This is all about the president protecting this whole presidency for Mr. Trump has been about husbanding, coveting, hanging on to his core base of support, about 2 out of every 5 voters. And he believes that if he can keep most of those 2 out of every 5 voters in his corner, that's a win for him.
Okay, and just to remind, at the end of this whole investigation, the special counsel, his job is to decide whether or not there's a crime here, and then he gives his information to Congress.
Or either to Congress to do some, if they don't, we could talk all day about, there's some question legally about whether a sitting president can be indicted for a crime. There's some constitutional question about that. So at the end of this, maybe he'll decide the president has done nothing wrong. Maybe he'll decide that he's going to test that constitutional principle and file a criminal charge against the president. Or what I think is the most likely is that he would refer his findings to Congress and say he may not have committed a federal crime, but he may have committed an impeachable offense. You, Congress, please take my file and make that decision.
He can also make a presentment to the grand jury of people he's caught up in this web, or he can just close down shop and have a simple, terse statement that we find no collusion, which was his underlying charge, between the Trump campaign and Russia to influence the election.
So there are many options, and we don't yet have a foggiest idea which direction he's going.
I think that's highly unlikely.
Well, I'm hoping for that.
Okay, when we come back after the break, we will turn to other items on the political agenda, especially the president's State of the Union address, in just a moment. Again, my guests today include David Hawkins. David is an insider's insider with 25 years experience reporting on how Washington works, or doesn't work, as the case may be. He is senior editor of Roll Call, the must-read newspaper covering Capitol Hill. He previously served as editor of CQ Roll Call Daily Briefing, managing editor at CQ Weekly, and editor at CQ, covering politics, policy, and people in both the legislative and executive branches. He is a graduate of Bucknell University in Lewisburg, Pennsylvania. Sitting to his left is Bradley Blakeman. Brad is a prominent Republican political strategist and currently a principal of the 1600 Group, a public policy firm. In the George W. Bush administration, he served on the president's senior staff as deputy assistant to the president for appointments in scheduling, vetting, research, and correspondence. In the private sector, Brad served as president and chief executive officer of Freedom's Watch, a non-profit conservative advocacy group responsible for creating and supervising over $60 million worth of television, radio, and print media advertising campaigns. An attorney by training, he appears regularly as a conservative political commentator on such news outlets as Fox News, MSNBC, BBC, Al Jazeera, and CNN. He's also an award-winning professor of public policy, politics and international affairs at Georgetown University. So, gentlemen, let's take a look at the State of the Union address, the major annual address that a president gives before joint houses of Congress. State of the Union 2018. Brad?
Well, the most important thing for a State of the Union for people to pay attention to is that's going to be a roadmap for them to follow as to what the president hopes to accomplish in 2018. What the president says, how much time is devoted, where it appears in the speech, will give people a good idea as to what his intentions are going to be. Usually State of the Union's generally 3 things that they concentrate on. Long list of domestic policy issues, talking about the military and national security. And that's all wrapped up in about 60 minutes of a speech before the American people and the world. It's as much to the world as it is to America.
Okay. When you think of State of the Union addresses, what comes to mind?
Very few of them are genuinely memorable. They are, in fact, laundry lists where most presidents try to sort of check the box for many different constituency groups. I would say, especially in an election year, which we're about to go into, the president is going to have many more. The president will have had many more aspirations than he will have plausible achievements. This is not going to be a year where his legislative program advances very far, if at all. all the talk about infrastructure, that is his big domestic initiative for the year. He's trying to spend federal money and get private investment leveraged into rebuilding American roads and bridges and railroads and airport tarmacs. That's not going to go very far. It is one night of the year where all the trappings of the presidency surround the president, and he looks great on TV, and everybody applauds, and it's the sort of the magisterial presidency where he gets that one night of sort of unfettered access to the world. But after that, it's going to be back to a grinding relationship with Congress, waiting for the independent counsel, managing Kim Jong-un. It's not going to be a big year for achievement.
After the president achieved a tax cut at the end of last year, why do you think infrastructure, something which many Democrats might support because it's jobs in their district, why do you think there isn't a prospect for an infrastructure bill this year?
I think many Republicans aren't actually all that interested in this. There is a civil war or friction within the Republican Party between where there's a solid block of Republicans who think spending this kind of money is not the right thing to do, and the combination of them and Democrats who really don't want to give the president much of a victory at all, I think will make this a very short and quickly forgotten debate.
Do you, what do you think about this idea of a civil war within the Republican Party?
I don't think there's a civil war. I think there's certainly contention within the Republican Party, but I happen to think that we're going to get an infrastructure bill. Democrats like to spend money. Republicans don't, but Republicans like to spend money on things that are needed, and certainly our critical infrastructure in the United States, be it our electric grid, our roads, our bridges, need repair. The question is how to spend that money wisely and make sure it's directed and timely directed to the need. So I happen to think infrastructure is going to be a good tool for Republicans to use to get Democrats on board as leverage for other things. The question is how big and robust will the package be? How creative will the financing be? Are we going to block grant money to states and say, here's your money for your bridge, you manage the project, you build your bridge? The Republicans I speak to, we're all for infrastructure if infrastructure gets us something else. It's not going to be a clean infrastructure bill. There's going to be a lot of ornaments put on that tree. The question is, how big and robust will it be? I happen to believe it's coming. Why? Is because 2018 is coming.
Well, this is what I wanted to ask you about, which is, in some ways, the big political question to begin the year, which is already the tide of political commentary seems to have turned on the prospects for the 2018 election. What looked like maybe the Republicans having some structural advantages because of the numbers of senators up from various states. We're already seeing record numbers of Republicans announcing their retirement, and the balance of opinion seems to be shifting toward the Democrats going to do really well. What do you think about that?
Well, I think history is with Democrats. Since the Civil War, in the party having power in the White House tends to lose about 32 House seats and 2 Senate seats, so they certainly have history on their side. We happen to believe we have math on our side because they are defending many more seats than the Republicans are, which means they're targeting as many as 90 seats in the House and 17 seats in the Senate. Well, that's a lot of money to spend and resources over a lot of needy candidates.
Okay, well, we have a lot to watch then over the next several weeks. Thank you, gentlemen, for helping explain the politics of January 2018, and we have a long year ahead. Thank you very much. بهذا نصل لنهاية هذه الحلقة من برنامج داخل واشنطن. إذا كانت لديكم أي استفسارات أو تعليقات حول هذه الحلقة وخاصة حول أثر إغلاق الحكومة الفيدرالية، أرجو أن تراسلوني مباشرة على عنوان البريد الإلكتروني التالي insidewashington@elhura.com. معكم روبرت ساتلوف. شكرا لكم وإلى اللقاء.